the top of the hour, so I'd like to welcome everyone who's just dialed in. And we're going to be looking at 10 predictions for 2015. There's been quite a lot of change happening in the industry. I think in the last 5 years have seen quite a dramatic change. I don't think 5 years ago social media was really on the landscape. The channel mix was probably quite different. So we're going to be getting the crystal ball out. We've been polishing it all up, and delighted to introduce to you two very future-looking individuals. Delighted to be joined by Steve Morrell from Contact Babel. Steve, you're based up in Newcastle, I understand.
That's right, yes.
And Steve, you're going to be looking at 5 sort of high-level predictions based on some of the research that you've been doing with Contact Babel.
That's right.
And we're going to be looking at top tips and predictions as well from the audience. And then Tim Pickard from New Voice Media, you're going to be looking from I guess predominantly a technology spin on predictions that likely happen in the technology world.
Yeah, a little bit about technology, a little bit about. I like to think that it's an all-encompassing view, Jonathan.
It is.
I'm going to try and bring it all together for you.
Wonderful. So you're going to have 10 predictions from our experts. We're hoping to get at least 10 predictions in from the audience, and you can leave your tips, questions, and predictions in the chat room. And there's a bottle of champagne for the best prediction. If you'd like to use hashtag tip for a tip, hashtag question for a question, or hashtag prediction for a prediction. Replay is going to be available later on this afternoon for you to share with your team, and a white paper will be going out to you following on from the webinar. Very simple on the chat room, no commercial messages, and web addresses or emails only from a direct message perspective. So we'd like to keep it all nice and polite in there if we can. So it's callcenterhelper.com/chat. Once you're logged in, top right-hand side of the screen, you can download the webinar slides from there. So a good number of people are already logged in. So I'd like to start off with a poll, and I'd just like to ask the audience, what percentage today of the audience, what percentage of your contacts today is voice? Is it 0 to 20%, 20 to 39%, 40 to 59%, 60 to 79%, or 80 to 100%? If you just like to vote on that. So those results are coming through now. I think Steve, your average today is around what, 58, 59%?
Yeah, it's high 60s, getting on to 70%.
Okay,
That would be my guess.
Well, let's have a look at the what the audience is saying. So the highest figure is 60 to 79%. So spot on there, Steve. There is quite a spread there, which is the next one is 29% is in the 40 to 59% range, 19% in the 80 to 100, followed by 70% for 20 to 39, and 6% 0 to 20. Right, so that's...
I'd be very interested to understand the industry for those people that are in the 0 to 20%. That'd be really interesting. If you would like to put that on the chat room, that'd be
yes,
that would be certainly enlightening.
Fascinating to see. So I just want to then follow up with a quick follow-up on that one, just saying, now, okay, that's today, and in 5 years' time, what do you think the channel mix is likely to be? So what is the mix of voice likely to be in 5 years' time?
You're doing Steve's job for him there.
Well, I think this will tie in with Steve's. So
let's keep our fingers crossed.
I think Steve's got his
I think he's
finger
pretty
on
much nailed it, actually, to be fair.
Yeah, I will say there's a world of difference between reality and prediction, though, because when I was at Data Monster back in the good old days of 1998, we asked contact center managers what they thought in 2003 their email volumes would look like, and it was 25%, which was clearly way off. So even we're not entirely in control of our destiny, it seems.
Okay, well, let's have a look at the results that have come back. And overall, it looks like the graph has just shifted down by about 20% overall there. I would like to say with the poll.
That looks to me as though there's an average of people are expecting maybe half of the stuff coming through will be voice. Personally, I'd say that's probably going to be a little higher than that. Like I say, momentum is it's difficult. I think eventually it will get to that. I think within 5 years, that might be a little bit big, but who knows? It's definitely heading in the right direction.
And I think what's fascinating here as well, Tim, is that 6% we looked at earlier has only actually got of the 0 to 20%. Has only gone up to 9%, which is really quite tiny. For bear in mind some of the stories you see in the press these days.
And this is I'm assuming this is volume of calls, not duration of calls.
That is indeed.
All right. Well, there you go. We might want to think about that as we go through the webinar.
Indeed. I think, Steve, you've got some points on that you're going to be bringing up later. Right, now I just like to do just one more little bit of drill down on this. And it's a question for you, if you'd like to put your answer into the chat room, which is, in 5 years' time, what do you think will be the channel of choice? Now, we've already identified that about half the audience are probably thinking it might be voice. Be interested to see if anyone has got any other views on what's likely to be the...
Well, the other interesting, So
here's the results. Steve says social media. Jan says web chat. Nick says voice. Nick says social media. Chat says Stuart. Web chat says Suki. Social media from Rachel. Web chat online says Craig. We're getting a lot of social media, a lot of web chats coming through. Catherine says voice. Good for you, Catherine. I think that would be still surprisingly a channel. Maybe it'd be the channel of choice if you can't get resolution on other channels, maybe.
Absolutely.
I'm not sure if I can see any videos coming through here. Christine says it depends on the vertical market. Louis says chat or push or pull through apps are likely to happen. BJ, quite interestingly, says channel of choice will be self-serve, which I think is quite interesting. I always go to the web to see if I can find a solution to a problem first.
I mean, I wonder how many, when we see stats like this, how many are including self-service and, in the numbers.
Yeah, almost as a given to begin with,
Yeah, exactly.
So we're seeing a few more social media, and we're seeing that we've got one person, Simon, has said video so far, I think, and Emma said the Internet of Things, which is interesting.
That could quickly take over.
Yeah, I'm always a bit surprised because as far as I can work out, the Internet of Things, the only application I can really see is either connecting your car to the Internet, which I can see valid for diagnostics, or an electric toothbrush that tells you whether you've brushed your teeth or not.
You've been listening to Mark Benioff too much, haven't you?
Actually, it probably wouldn't tell me it would tell me if my son's cleaned his teeth. Which
well, that'd be handy.
I have my doubts about. Right, so top tips, questions and predictions. If you'd like to leave them in the chat room, use the hashtag prediction for prediction, hashtag question for question, hashtag tip for tip. And I will be asking Steve after the webinar if you could pick the winner for either a bottle of champagne or box of chocolates based on the predictions they make today. So with that, I'd like to hand across to you, Steve Morrell from Contact Babel. Steve, I'll just pass the baton across to you, and if you could let us have your 5 predictions for 2015, please.
Okay. Let's go. There we are. Thanks, Jonty. Hi, everybody. Right, let's start by looking at some numbers, as you would expect from Contact Babel, perhaps. Right. We think overall we're in a growing industry, pretty sure about that. Net gain we're expecting is about 26,000 agent positions, which seems like an awful lot, but in fact equates to maybe 2.5 or 3% of the overall industry, so steady rather than spectacular growth in 2015.
So Steve, what would that likely put the total population in the UK working in the contact centre industry?
About 700,000 seats, which equates to about 1.1 million agent positions, something.
Wow, so
north of 1 million certainly, well north.
Yeah, very good, very good.
And in terms of overall contact centres, looking to add probably around 100 or so, all different shapes and sizes, of course, and that will bring us up to close to the 6,000 mark. What this means to the economy, it is a sector that is grossly underlooked both by central government and also by the likes of inward investment agencies, if there are any left anymore, not just in the UK, but as we've seen elsewhere as well. Despite the fact that 1 in 25 jobs is within the contact center industry, it still has a pretty low profile, but we are an important industry. In the UK, at the moment, we are looking at over 11 billion inbound interactions per year. Now, this includes B2B as well as B2C. And this is just live interaction, so this is phone, email, web chat, SMS, anything that people have to deal with. We're not including self-service in here because the numbers can get astronomical when you're looking at web self-service, and it's different from Apple Apple, to be honest with you. So this is just the live stuff. The US is around 6 times the size of the UK.
So it's interesting to note there, Steve, that despite all the new digital self-service channels that are coming along, it looks like the number of agent positions is, has been still growing and is likely to grow in the future. There, I think that's quite an interesting statistic.
Yeah, it is. Well, if you look at these, the likes of email, web chat, SMS, social media, there are automated front-end virtual agents for most of these, if not all of these solutions, but they only deal with a certain amount. We need people there in the background to actually make sure that the information is correct. And to handle anything, to handle more complicated or multiple queries on the same interaction. So yeah, the need for live agents certainly hasn't gone away.
So Steve, sorry to interrupt you. What's the if the growth in agents is 2 to 3%? What's the growth in inbound interactions to get to 11.2 billion? Is that growing?
No, you'll have to buy the report to find that out.
Okay, digging too deep.
That's a neat way of saying I don't have the answer off the top of my head.
Okay.
It's single-figure digit growth, put it that way.
Yeah. Okay. That would be an interesting metric to find out how that ratio is changing.
Yeah. Sure. What we can say is that in terms of just telephony, off the top of my head, that is growing, as you would expect. Call lengths are growing year on year, despite the fact the number of calls is coming down, the length is going up, the complexity. And the opportunities that people are taking, businesses are taking to understand more about the customer and deliver a better experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
So our prediction for this year, our first prediction, possibly not way out there, which is fine for a first prediction, web chat, interaction analytics, and mobile apps to become mainstream. You can argue whether they're mainstream already, but what we're basing this on is information that the industry has given us, rather than our own kind of ideas. We go away each year and we invite hundreds of contact centres to tell us what they think they're going to be doing next year. So, for example, web chat. At the moment, 38% of UK contact centres offer web chat. Now, in 2015, a further 25% say they're going to implement technology. In the case of interaction analytics, the current penetration rate is about 1 in 6, 16%, and that is stated to almost double to 28% by the end of the year. And for mobile apps, the penetration rate is currently 21%, and that's expected again to almost double to 39%. Now we need to be aware
all going from quite. So those figures are all going from sort of quite niche to really quite mainstream.
Yeah, I'd say so. And when you start looking at, this covers the entire industry. We look at everybody with 10 seats upwards. So obviously, what's happening in the 250 seat arena is different from what's happening in the 20 seat. So you can see that the likes of interaction analytics, which is obviously does best with the more volumes and more complexity it has. That's going to be higher in the large contact centres than in the small. But this is just industry-wise, Important to understand that these expectations, the figures I've quoted there, they don't always match reality. This is what people are planning, people believe, but obviously, there's one thing talking about it, another thing doing it. But we can still take that to be undoubted evidence that those 3 technologies will enjoy a big jump in usage and implementation in the next year to come. I'm not too sure about that. Looking at
Steve, we're just getting a message. Could you just speak a little bit closer to the microphone, please?
Okay, hopefully that's better.
Thank you.
If we look at IVR here, the chart on the left suggests that businesses have been trying to do too much with IVR. 85% of UK contact centres using touch-tone IVR have 5 or more options available to customers, and 30% have more than 10 overall. And that's something that we find especially prevalent in large operations, where the temptation to offer more and more granular routing options is quite strong. Probably worthwhile having a word of explanation here. An IVR system with 2 levels and 3 choices per level will have a total number of 6 options, for example. Touchtone IVR is one of those things that's been used for many, many years now, but customers still complain about it as they don't really understand the alternative is waiting longer to speak to an agent when they could have successfully used self-service, or having to speak to a receptionist who then has to route the call manually. One thing that we see as being key to change here is the uptake in smartphones, which account for about half of all mobile devices in the UK and US. And they offer new ways of using IVR, and really they have to, because the traditional way of using an IVR, where we press 1 for this and 2 for that, that's not really suitable anymore for a device that you have to take away from your ear to press the right number and then listen to, put it back to your ear, hopefully in time to hear all the options. Of course, people can put it on speakerphone, but obviously, often this isn't something that people feel comfortable with doing in public, and quite right too. Tim is going to be talking later more about visual IVR, so I'm just going to mention it briefly here, and it involves putting a visual front end on an existing IVR system in order to make it significantly quicker for the customer to use, as well as business being able to offer more routing options and more self-service possibilities if that's what it's being used for, and even cool things like in-queue videos or just maybe solutions YouTube videos if relevant to what's being called in on it. Seeing a lot of options there. Third point there, conversational IVR, that's what we're calling the use of 2-way natural language-based speech recognition. So not the touchtone, so speech recognition. And this can intelligently query the customer in the context of the customer's history, as well as the information that they've provided within the IVR session already. But important thing, quite apart from any kind of technical or financial considerations that come with speech recognition, and there can be some, there's a big challenge to train users to start using natural language to describe their issue rather than just trying a couple of keywords. Natural language provides far more accurate and useful results. But the problem is that many customers, many people have been very used to keeping things simple when they're dealing with technology, and really that's kind of counterproductive when we're looking at natural language. So that's a barrier we have to overcome. So our second prediction is that mobile, especially for smartphones, will give voice self-service a boost, whether through touchtone IVR or indeed speech recognition. Moving on, identification and verification, or ID&V. For many years, we've been tracking the amount of time that it takes to verify that the caller is who they actually say they are at the beginning of the call. In the vast majority of cases, this is done with the help of an agent. We're looking at like 98% of times done through an agent. Now, whether that's through the agent alone, or even worse, after an IVR has already gathered this information, which is obviously hugely frustrating to the customer as well as being, a complete waste of time and money. As the years have gone by, the proportion of calls requiring ID&V has increased in line with things like the greater need for compliance in various industries, an overall awareness of the need to provide better security, and also things like increased regulations and legislation in many industries, particularly financial services. Now, although the exact figure does change from year to year depending on who we're talking to, it's pretty consistent that around 10% of the call, or 30 seconds or so, is spent doing ID&V. And okay, that doesn't seem like a lot, but when we add up how much time this takes, it means the industry ends up spending around £3 billion. This is the UK, ends up spending about £3 billion a year just to make sure the caller is who they say they are. Not really adding any value to anybody here. So opportunities, really. Biometrics, which identify the customer through physical characteristics, are starting to be used. Still low level, but they do have great potential. Voice biometrics can enroll the customer through the voice print, and they compare the person talking with this captured voice print. And this can remove the need for agent intervention in many cases, not all cases, but significant proportion, making a huge difference to cost, especially in very large contact centres, as you would imagine. It's also the case that the customer can be identified without the need even to go through a particular security process, as the voice print can be matched, or otherwise, as the customer is actually having a conversation with the agent and telling them why they're ringing. So obviously that improves the customer experience and also cuts down on call lengths. Third point there, device-specific ID&V. I came across quite a cool thing a couple of days ago. In China recently, we've seen makers of smartphones that have fingerprint readers, and they're working with payment solution providers to enable mobile payment to be made just by swiping a finger. And this is kind of a step along the road, I think, for businesses to be able to identify the caller through fingerprint recognition on their personal device, so smartphone. It's maybe not something, well, it's probably definitely not something that's going to be mainstream this year, but automating IDV in general offers a big opportunity to cut costs and also make things a lot easier for the customer. So that win-win is something that we really look for. We've got to be, good for the business and good for the customer. Well, do you know what? Chances are that's got a good chance of succeeding. So our third prediction is that automating ID&V will be taken more seriously. And at this point, I believe Johnson's going to carry out a poll about identity verification. Over to you, Johnson.
Yeah, we're going to do a poll just to follow up on your question there, which is how long does it take to identify a caller? So if you just like to put in your verification time within your contact center, is it 0 to 10 seconds? Is it 10 to 29 seconds? Is it 30 to 59 seconds? Is it more than 60 seconds? Or do you have a different type of center, like an advice or sales line, where you don't have to verify callers? So if you'd just like to vote on that, be interesting to see what the results are. Steve, your prediction was, your measurement you've done from surveying people is around 30 seconds, isn't it?
Tends to be around 30 seconds, yes. Yeah.
Well, that ties in. Yeah, I think that ties in. It's quite interesting. We can now go and have a look at the spread of the information here, and I'll share the results up on the screen. Sample size here of 244. So yeah, it very much ties in with your 30-second mark there, with roughly 48% of the audience less than 30 seconds and a shade more. The biggest one is then 10 to 29 second range, 29% in the 30 to 59 second range, 8% in the 60-plus second range, only a very, very small percentage, 8% are able to in less than 10 seconds, and 15% are involved in other industry types like advice lines who don't need to.
That's interesting. It seems to me that the people on this call are more likely to ID&V a caller rather than the industry as a whole, because it's normally around 2/3 of calls tend to get this.
Oh, okay. So interesting. We do get an element of self-selecting on some of the webinars. So, Steve, if I can pass the baton back to you for your other predictions, if you can just pick the pace up on those a little bit, would be very useful. Thank you.
On to the fourth prediction now. Well, we've got some very new research. We only wrote it last week, so we haven't published it yet, but it shows that only 1 in 8 customers prefer to call the contact center when they want to get in touch with a business. Email is more than 3 times as popular, especially in the older demographics, surprisingly enough. We've said many times before that the success of a channel is far more to do with its use and accessibility for customers rather than what the business wants customers to use. In the case of web chat, we believe this is a channel, as I said before, which is a win-win, both for customers and business. And we can see here that there's a high level expectation amongst businesses who are rushing to implement this. It's important to note, though, that web chat volumes are still relatively low, only around 3% industry-wide, although it can be a lot higher in the likes of things like IT and retail. But as more and more people use it successfully, we do expect customer uptake to grow very significantly in 2015. However, at the moment, live web chat, it isn't a very cheap channel in the same way that touch-tone IVR is, which costs anywhere between 10 and 50 pence per session. Live web chat here, the industry says it costs them £2.30 to handle one compared to £3.77 for a live phone call. Now, obviously, bear in mind we're looking at, there's massive differences in all of these things, but that's what the mean industry average comes out at. So that's, it's a saving, but it's not a spectacular saving. You don't implement web chat and think, you know what, I'm just going to save millions and millions here, because chances are you're not. So, really, I think what we're going to see is a lot more virtualized web chat coming into play. That is, So when an automated system acts as a front end initially, bringing back potential answers to the caller or the browser, whatever you want to call them, and if that doesn't work, then escalating it to a live agent. So, you know, we do see that at the moment from a customer's perspective. Some businesses choose to hide the scene between live and virtual. Others, you know, make a big deal out of it because it can be quite obvious when you're using it. We expect to see a lot more of this, so we expect to see that average cost of handling web chat as a whole decrease considerably. And on to the final thing, the relentless march of multi-channel. Relentless, yes, but relatively slow march of multi-channel compared to some of the things that, you know, various analysts come out with, what we can expect in the next 2 years. And, it's not an entire sea change.
I think that chart says, Steve, that it's not going to drop off in the next 2 years, because I think, you know, if you just draw the trend line from the past, I can't see a great deal of a sudden drop off happening there.
No, there's not. You know, there are things happening that, you know, are changing things. Customers are becoming happier using online, and they've got greater expectations. We've got mobile devices and, you know, social media and all this, you know, good stuff. But, you know, I wouldn't say there's anything that's actually going to force people to say, do you know what, ringing somebody up is so last century. It's not. It doesn't give me the best way of talking to a business anymore. And that's why customers do it. Going back to the previous slide when I said only 1 in 8 customers said, you know what, I think I'll ring the call center. To begin with, most of the calls you get, 7 out of 8, they've tried elsewhere or they prefer to try elsewhere. People aren't doing it because they fancy a good old chat. They're doing it because voice gives them the best opportunity to get their question answered in a correct way in a relatively small amount of time. That's the driver. There's nothing else. That is the driver. So that's what the other channels have to compete with. And really, you know, I can see the likes of web chat being able to take over, not flip entirely, but certainly take over a certain amount, a certain type of telephony calls. So anyway, since we started tracking the figure in 2006, the proportion of inbound interactions that come from live telephony, so that blue line right at the top there, has decreased from 90% to around 70%. We should be aware, though, and this is important, we should be aware, and looking at these figures, that the overall number of all interactions has increased very significantly. As there are far more channels available to customers now, customer expectations have increased, and you might say that patience has decreased as well. And the availability of various devices like smartphones, tablets, PCs, etc., that's encouraged people to communicate more in general. So when we're considering what will happen with telephony volumes in the future, although we believe the mix will continue to decline gently, I'd say, from 70% to perhaps 60 to 65% in 2018, the overall number of calls handled will remain very similar. They're just getting longer. And there's more emails and web chats and things like that. We're still expecting to see growth in the email channel, which is now being driven by its popularity with the oldest demographic, so 65-plus-year-old, very keen to use it. With the youngest age group that we studied in the as yet unpublished report, the 18 to 24-year-olds are actually choosing mobile in many cases rather than email. So, there's a big difference along age lines. So,
and I think that's a very interesting point there, Steve. That you'd be forgiven for all the hype that I pick up about web chat for not realizing that perhaps email is going to grow to a very significant channel overall. So thanks, Steve, very much for those 5 predictions. We're going to jump across now and have a look at a few predictions from the audience. So let's have a look at what our audience are putting into the chat room. Just a reminder that if you want to get your questions, tips, or predictions in, just like to use in the chat room, callcenterhelper.com/chat. Use #question, #tip, or #prediction, and we can sift them through. So let's have a look at what's coming through. Fiona has said voice calls will reduce and be replaced with online activity, although average call times will increase due to more complex inquiries. I think that ties in very nicely with the prediction you just made there, Steve. Simon says voice will become lower but a higher value interaction. It will remain the best choice for complex queries and the chance for upselling, whereas bread and butter work will migrate to web chat and social media, thus driving the need for higher caliber voice agents. I know, Tim, that you've often said voice is sometimes the forgotten channel in all this digital channel hype.
Well, I think it's easy to think about it as a thing of the past, but it clearly has a place, and it clearly has a high value place in customer interactions.
It does indeed. So let's have a look through. Matt makes the very relevant point of customer demographics of age 40 plus who would rather speak to a human, whereby the younger generation want to use internet and smartphone apps at the touch of a button. This generation will grow and eventually become the older generation, therefore phasing out voice calls. And this could happen over the next 20 years.
20 years is a long time.
It is quite a long time, and even then, I think I've been on web chats that once you get over about 20 minutes, you type your problem. You won't wait three minutes for the next suggestion to come back. You say, "Oh, I've already tried that." Wait another 3 minutes for the next one, and after about 45 minutes, I think, "Oh, I wish I'd phoned."
Different channels definitely have different values in for different types of interaction.
Carl, interestingly, I'd suggest business take a big look at volume of calls, agents available before implementing a visual IVR. Nothing worse than thinking, "Ooh, I've avoided the IVR process, but now I'm still on hold." The basic promise of under-promise and over-deliver still holds there. Steve, this is quite an interesting one. Customer feedback will become even more important through the year as the competition aims to differentiate from rivals, especially as we move to multi-channel servicing. The need to provide easy and superior service will be key to retention as customers become less loyal. We need to service customers as they want to be serviced and not as how we want them to be.
Beautiful. Yeah, that's what a great
absolutely. Something I'd add to that, it drives up there, is the more knowledge we have of products and services and the more perfect a market becomes, the more it's possible to bring in various competitors and various different alternatives. So in fact, what is there left to differentiate upon? And the answer is obviously customer service. So yes, it can only ever become more important because people they're not just staying with what they already know.
Okay, well thank you very much for that. We're going to jump across to Tim Pickard now, and Tim will be showing us his predictions for 2015. We'll just move the baton across to Tim. Yeah. I'll just let's see if we can pass it across, and we'll move it across now. So I'll just pass it across to you now, Tim, and if you just like to share your screen.
Yep.
And there we go. I'd like to go full screen.
Okay, great. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining this session. I'm going to move quickly to my first slide. It's just a little bit of context setting. What are the 6 fundamental things?
I think we may have to go back to your base level slide there. We're
right.
Not quite seeing them here.
Getting it now, no?
I think we're seeing, I don't know if there's 2 screens that... I'm seeing this one here.
Right.
Okay, well, Tim, if you'd like to carry on with that, I'll get the slides up on my screen, and if you'd like to make your points, I'll...
yes, okay, I'll move ahead while you help the slides to catch up. There are 6 fundamental things that I think that customers want. One is to know me, in other words, have some history of who I am and what might be my buying history or the resolution about my problem history, for example. And we all know that there are some people who do this very well. Amazon is an example of somebody who does that very well. Be relevant. So that's a little bit more, similar to Know Me, but a little bit more real time. So provide your customers and monitor your customers' journey so you can proactively engage with them, or understand what their browsing history is at that point in time and have some really relevant information for them that's going to help them with the problem that they're trying to resolve or the product that they may be trying to purchase. 3 is about competency and good advisor training, good support technologies will obviously help here. Good call routing to make sure that we're routing calls through to agents with particular skills or competencies, and CRM integration into the telephony is clearly a very important part of doing that, and being able to, as somebody mentioned in the chat room, verify using inbound calling number or other technology, and route the call with the with the customer information to the agent at the same time. And also around competency is consistency, making sure that you do this and you provide the customer with a great level of service, but you do it consistently. That's a really, really key thing. Trustworthy, of course, managing the inquiry, following up on activities that you say you're going to follow up on, and managing private information in a trustworthy way. Likeable, this is about human values of how you deliver a service versus what service you're delivering. So I think a very key part, and something we're going to come on to at the end of this, is the how part of the engagement with, particularly with live contact center, voice, chat, and availability. And we've talked a fair amount about that, but it's being available at the times and in the ways that your customers want to interact with you across the proliferation of channels that they may have.
And Alex says that he thinks there should be another one on the list, which is to be understandable, which I guess is to cut down the amount of jargon that we get.
Absolutely. Does that mean, is that a hint? Should I?
No, I think from a contact customer perspective.
Right. Are you in charge of slides?
Yeah, I am.
There's two builds. So in the chat room, who do you think is good? Would be interesting. And also, next click.
How do you rate your organization?
How do you rate your organization? Yep. So if you could post those to the chat room, that would be really interesting. So prediction number 6, we adopt more outside-in thinking to become smarter about channel mix design. So in the past, and clearly nobody on this call will have done this, but some companies have adopted a new channel if that channel promises to be cheaper than the previous one. So voice to email, maybe email to social, or forcing customers down a particular route. For example, you can only engage with us through self-service if that's, if for a particular problem or part of the business. That does not work. Obviously, we all, I think, understand that. And you can see here a graphical depiction of that. So the designer thinks he's built a nice wide path. The user experience is that actually it's quite narrow, it's muddy, and it's probably leading in the wrong direction. So we need to make sure that we're understanding how our customers want to be able to engage with us. And who will win? The customer, ultimately, if enough of them vote with their feet, or these days with their mouse clicks.
And I think this is quite fascinating, because if I mirror this picture onto the average IVR design, which is set up at the time, it's probably quite accurate at the time when the whole system, the new telephony goes in. But
yes.
3 years later, I'm
yes.
not sure. It doesn't look something a bit like
right.
that.
So flexibility around that is key. A quick plug for the cloud, obviously, in cloud technologies, you can change that whenever you like. So 60% of customers change their contact channel depending on where they are and what they're doing. So that's a really interesting statistic. And that means that multiple channels, or being able to have your customers reach you through multiple channels, is really important. But there's a distinction between multi-channel and omni-channel, and as I describe it, multi-channel is having those channels available. Omni-channel is being able to provide context across those channels, so that you can map the customer's journey, you can map the customer's engagement with you, and keep the context in one place. So that's really, really key in terms of how you manage that environment. So I just wanted to share this with you because I thought it was really interesting. So even among the youngest generations, things are changing very quickly. So if we just click again, on the left is young professionals. These are 19 to 25-year-olds. And you can see that the types of engagement that they're having, or the types of technologies that they're engaged with. So it's Twitter, it's LinkedIn because they're young professionals, it's a bit of YouTube in the evening and some Instagram, and you can see how that works throughout the day. And then the teens, who are the 13 to 19-year-olds, don't use Facebook because my parents are on Facebook, and they use BlackBerry Messenger because it's private. They use Snapchat because their parents don't. So the point of comparing these two slides is actually that intergenerationally, i.e. we consider a generation to be 25 years. Intergenerationally, so 19 to 25 versus 13 to 19-year-olds, you have two separate mediums by which these groups are communicating with each other, and ultimately how they're going to want to communicate with us as businesses. So I think that's a really interesting observation, that things are changing really relatively fast, and that we need to think about how we're managing these channels over time really, really seriously. So, prediction number 7. We learned how to engage with the mobile customer differently. So just looking at the next slide, this is the explosive growth of messaging apps. And there are probably over a billion, well, it's well over a billion users of messaging apps on this slide since 2010. So within the last 4 years, the growth of messaging apps has just been phenomenal. And I just put that up just as an example of how quickly things change in terms of how we want to communicate with each other. So going to the next slide, this is about visual IVRs and how to potentially put your customers in charge of that IVR process. So either through apps or through responsive database, through responsive websites, being able to provide that kind of interaction. So if we just click one more. And another, sorry, and again.
I'll be on the bills, okay?
Yeah. Just, yep. Right. So just go back on the IVR one. Sorry. There we go. So the ability to choose the service, to choose the channel, and to choose the time in which you want to call. So all of these make it a lot more flexible in terms of how me as an individual can contact the contact center. So it puts control into my hands potentially, bearing in mind Carl's comments earlier on, and it also allows you to be much more specific potentially about who you want to call. So I might be able to look at the skill level of specific agents and be able to pick those skills to suit my particular problem. So prediction number 8. Real-time data creates opportunities for new service delivery models. Here we're looking at the ability for individuals potentially to share information that they may not have been willing to share last year. So we now know that 36% of global consumers are willing to share their current location with retailers via GPS, double the number who did it in 2013. And that's because you're sharing for mutual value. Now, the other example of this is one of our customers. I'm sure we're all familiar with those dreadful cards that get posted through the door for that £10 Amazon purchase that you made, and now you've got to go 40 miles to the nearest depot to pick up your box. DPD have been very clever in how they use technology, and were the first delivery service to go to 1-hour delivery time schedules. So you don't have to wait in for half a day or a day. You can actually select your hour, but that means you're trading information. That means I know when you're in, but I also probably know when you're out. So we're trading that information for value back to the consumer. So number 9, we continue to find new ways to personalize customer experiences. and this is about one of the fundamentals that I mentioned earlier on, about the fundamentals of what customers want. Know me and be relevant. So we want to find ways in which we can look at people as individuals, but also to recognize that one size does not fit all. And this is very true in terms of being able to recognize customers, being able to understand their situation through information about that customer that we hold. That could be buying information, or it could be event history, for example, held in the CRM. We put the two together, the call and the information about the customer, route it through to the right person intelligently based on skills, and we're dealing in a much different environment based on individuals. By the way, we can also do that in a multi-channel environment or an omni-channel environment, and do it across channel. So just a quick plug for New Voice Media, IDEO and Salesforce, two of our business partners. Using these three technologies, we can understand recent browser history, potentially recent intent as well, and have that information displayed to the agent so that they can really understand, both based on previous buying behavior potentially, but also current browser history, what the intent of that call might be, and be able to answer it in as positive a way as possible.
And we're just going to jump to a poll on the point of personalization. And the poll is, what are you doing in terms of personalization of contacts? Do you use the first name of your customer? Do you have a separate queue for high-value customers? Do you route callers based on their CLI? That's the telephone number that the customer's telephone number. Do you rate calls to the last agent they spoke to? And do you route calls based on open cases? This is like an open trouble ticket rather than an open suitcase. So if you'd just like to put your votes in there, you can select more than one. So if you'd like to select all of those that apply. So let me just share the results with everyone here. So 56% of people are using the first name, and I guess there's quite an interesting debate of when it's appropriate to use someone's first name rather than Mr. Pierce or Mr. Pickard, or Mr. Morrell, and whether you need permission to do that. The next one down, 34% have a separate queue for high-value customers, which is probably the oldest form of personalization, the gold queue as it's known. 32% are routing callers based on the CLI telephone number, which I think is quite a high number actually. 27 are routing calls to the agent last spoken to, which I think that's an absolute cracking idea. If you've got a problem, look through to the.
Absolutely.
I wish that was almost standard practice, really.
Well, these things all make sense, don't they? And that's all about what the customer wants. They want the easiest.
It's cynical though. Maybe the last agent couldn't help you. So why do you want to speak to them again?
Possibly.
Well,
maybe you need to give an option. Say if you'd like to speak to the last person you spoke to.
Exactly.
Maybe that's another menu on the IVR system. So okay, that's great. So Tim, if you'd like to move then to your last of your predictions.
Jonty, there are a few photos on this last. So if you want to flick through those while I talk. So this is Airbnb's latest contact center in Portland, USA, and looking at those photos, you may not recognize it first off as a contact center, but I think going back to the values of how we deliver service and thinking about a lot of what's been talked about on this call, in the sense that those calls may be getting shorter, they may be getting fewer, but they're getting more complex, and they're becoming higher value, and they're allowing us to have that engagement with our customer. And a lot of the metrics that we used to think about in terms of how we manage contact centers are changing. So things like call handle time have really been turned on their head. And many of our customers are seeing call handle times go up, which they're delighted about, because actually they're seeing their customer satisfaction score go up, and their first call resolution score go up as well. So they're not looking at that as a metric that they want to drive down. Far from it. They're seeing that as an opportunity to engage with customers, give a great customer experience, and potentially get that whole positive cycle around re-engagement with sales and marketing, so in other words, buying more, but also becoming evangelists for you because of the great customer service that you get. So, I think people, process, technology, it's an old adage, but really we need to focus on, are we giving our people, are we hiring the best people, are we giving them the best support, the best training, the best technology to be able to manage the demands of a true omni-channel contact center environment.
Indeed. Well, thank you very much for that, Tim. And I think the takeaway here is if you want to have a funky call center, don't have sofas in the guest room, but have put some cushions on the floor. But we're just going to do a quick poll now of Tim's 5 predictions to see which ones are on your 2015 list. So is it outside-in thinking? Is it mobile customer service? Is it real-time data-driving self-service? Is it personalization? Or is it transformation of the culture? And seriously, I love those ideas of, quite a whole different approach to how the contact center is. So if you'd just like to vote on, you can vote on more than one of those, and it'd be interesting to see the results. Let's just share those with you all now. And we see quite a wide range. Actually, I think your predictions are probably spot on there, Tim.
Well, there's a lot of consistency across 4 of those anyway, in terms of where people are going to be putting some resources this year. So that's really interesting to see.
So mobile customer service, real-time data driving new service delivery, personalization, and culture transformation. Perhaps the outside-in thinking is perhaps still a little avant-garde, and possibly needs to get a higher level of board engagement. To be
maybe I just didn't describe it very well. Didn't sell it well enough.
So there we are. So quite a good endorsement there. I think of those predictions that are there, and lots of food for thought overall. So let's just go and have a look at the latest thinking from our audience. So let's go and have a look at the what we've got coming through from a chat room perspective, and let's have a look at some of the top tips and predictions coming through. Phil thinks there will be a transition to more UK-based services as nearshoring becomes less popular from a customer's perspective. I guess this is tied in as we move to digital channels. The need to have contact centres based in the UK, you could possibly get away with moving contact centres offshore. So. And interesting. I don't know if you would agree with that one.
I think no, I think that's absolutely true. I think we've seen a start of a trend towards that, and I think it's definitely true that those organisations that did offshore are bringing their contact centres back.
Here's an interesting one, Steve. The fastest companies will outbeat the slower companies, not big companies outweighing the small ones. The transfer of knowledge through the workflow in a company is key for great customer service. I don't know if you're seeing any of that, Steve, in your studies between large and small.
Difficult to quantify. That is very difficult to quantify. And I think generally speaking, it's a bit of a truism to say the larger the company, the more leviathan and difficult it is to move it out of what it's already doing. So it does tend to be smaller companies which are nimbler and quicker to act. So if you do get if you do get a large company that does actually have the culture and the processes and the drive from the senior management in order to react quickly and take the lead, then by comparison with their peers, they do seem to be moving at the speed of light.
I mean, I think it talks to the nature of competition. That comment that the nature of competition is changing due to technologies, due to globalization, due to a lot of different factors actually. But you see, some amazing companies starting up, taking on the big guys, and really forcing them to become more modern in their approach. And I think it's a very exciting time.
Indeed. So here we are, a prediction from Nick. Contact centres will leverage unified communications more strongly to involve back office and subject matter experts in better resolution times. I think we're starting to see a trend of the call centre gradually seeping out into the rest of the building as we get more experts coming.
Yeah, and I think that's about engagements of experts as well, isn't it? it's about anybody in the company could be an expert, and they didn't necessarily be in the call center, but they may have some opportunity to help customers over time, and being able to manage that interaction. In other words, being able to get hold of those people at the right time and have them available is something that I think, as we get deeper and deeper into the complexity, becomes more important.
Yeah, and Catherine has said, I think this ties in with your prediction, Steve, there'll be more initiation of calls via apps, social media or web, dealing with the issue, and then dealing with the issue via voice, supported by email.
Yeah. I mean, that's a fair point, and I think businesses and technology providers really need to find a smooth and seamless path from initiating something on a mobile device, which might, an intended self-service, and then escalating that up to an agent in, as I say, a seamless fashion. Now, that's really the trick at the moment, isn't it? Because there's not many places doing that.
Philip sees immediate available add-on middleware solutions like virtual assistants, which we talked about, ASR, automatic speech recognition, VIVR, I don't know if anyone on the chat room can...
Visual IVR.
Visual IVR, of course it is. That's the start of them. And to utilize existing customer service investment towards more self-service. Tom saying live chat and social media will grow into key initial contact methods, not just seen as a complement to voice. So it's more of an initial part,
right,
especially around social media, where companies know action is taken when a company's brand is being mentioned online.
Yes, I think that's true. I think this is an area where consumers and customers, the power is shifting a little bit in terms of how the relationship between customers and their suppliers. So I think that, and social media is definitely having a big hand in that, and the power of consumer groups, and also is obviously having a hand in that as well. So I think that's definitely an interesting point.
Can I just jump in there, John, and say that one issue with social media that we haven't overcome is the fact that a lot of the time it's owned and run by marketing, whereas it's a contact-centered headache. So that's something that will have to be addressed, deciding who actually owns it.
Yeah, and certainly I think the smarter companies are sort of having marketing owning social media, and customer service owning the customer service, like Our Company Cares type feed. So yeah, very relevant point there, Steve. Sarah says agents will expect higher pay with further multi-skilling and increased knowledge. Certainly as the calls get more complex, I think we can see that. Certainly,
yeah.
Deep technical support has always attracted much higher salaries for certainly high availability computer systems is what I can think about.
Well, I think this is one of those things that talks to the general shift away from we're managing a cost environment to we're viewing it as a customer interaction and something that has higher value as well. So
yeah, that's true. I mean, this is something that we track year on year as well, salaries, and I will say businesses have kept the new agent salaries there or thereabouts the rate of inflation, as in pretty low, 2 or 3% increase per year. So although things are more complex than they were 5 or 6 years ago, certainly wages haven't risen in line as yet.
Here's a fascinating one. Customer satisfaction scores will directly implement your sales in the future. Who goes on holiday or books a hotel without checking its rating these days? Who decided I'm not staying at that place? Look what people say. So investment in staff is essential, as well as a focus on demand via process and policy.
Yeah.
Now, I wonder, that's interesting. It's a scary thought, actually, of your customer satisfaction scores being put onto your website, rather than just circulated internally.
Yeah. Well, it's about customer satisfaction and as a differentiator. So. Brand will be affected by poor customer service, and over time, that will become a differentiator for the business if you're delivering a very high level of customer service.
Yeah, definitely. I think we see a lot of businesses using NPS now as an internal metric, and looking at revenues and things compared to NPS does, but that is an internal metric. there's lots of external customer review sites and lots and lots of them. I think if we get into a position whereby you get a handful of leaders, then that is the point at which you can say yes, customer satisfaction, customer, you can actually match that with revenue and what the decisions are. At the moment, maybe it's too fragmented to actually be able to to correlate it.
Okay, wonderful. In one or two words, if you could put in what you liked about the webinar best today. We're just coming up to the top of the hour, so it's time for us to start to wind down. So if you could put your comments about what you liked best about the webinar into the chat room. Just a reminder that slides are available later on Call Center Helper, and if you want to see a recording of this webinar, because we've gone through a great number of predictions, you can watch that through callcenterhelper.com/recorded webinars. We've got a number of webinars in the series, and I'm back in Basingstoke again on the 5th of March looking at how to improve first contact resolution.
Can't keep you away, can we?
No, indeed. So I'd just like to say thank you very much to our two speakers. Steve Morrell, thanks for joining us today and sharing your stats and predictions for the future. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
And thank you, Tim, for joining us again for a webinar and for sharing your predictions and insight into the future. And I'd like to thank everyone in the audience for dialing today on a brisk January day. Thank you all, and see you all again next week. Thank you then. Bye-bye.